a corporation that once ruled the skies, a symbol that once represented the untouchable power of American technology. And now, cold factories, silent assembly lines, and massive orders vanishing without a sound. Boeing has made no declaration of emergency, but every sign shows. They are quietly retreating like a defeated army, without announcements, without farewells. Why have airlines simultaneously turned away? What has driven thousands of engineers, those who once believed they were building the future of mankind, to now choose to walk away? Has the moment of decline arrived? And what will Boeing do to preserve an empire that is cracking from within? Air India 171 is just the tip of the iceberg. How many scandals are still being hid? The disaster of Air India 171 stunned the world. But what is even more terrifying is that it brought back the memory of serious scandals that Boeing once caused. People are saying this isn't the first accident, and very likely, it won't be the last. Immediately, a series of past scandals were dug up again. First were the two crashes of the 737 MAX in 2018 and 2019 that killed 346 people. The investigation then concluded that Boeing had hidden a critical software flaw to launch the product on time. They chose to boost stock prices instead of ensuring passenger safety. And now, after the Air India 171 crash, many are beginning to ask, has Boeing really changed? Or are they just repeating old mistakes under a new name, the 787? It didn't stop there. Internal complaints once ignored are now being shared widely across social media. An engineer who worked at Boeing's South Carolina plant wrote, "The fuselage material was defective with small air bubbles. We once issued a warning, but management said, leave it, because fixing it would mean losing a big contract with Singapore." Another person said, "We were forced to inspect massive numbers of components in too little time. Some days I had to approve 15 planes, just looking at paperwork, no actual checks." And the name getting the most attention right now is John Barnett, an engineer who had exposed Boeing years ago. In March 2024, he suddenly died right before he was scheduled to testify in court. The case was ruled as suicide. But after the Air India crash, people began to wonder, did he know something about the 787 that he never got the chance to say? All those suspicions create a chilling feeling. Boeing is not only in crisis, they may have been deceiving us for years, from engineers to investors to passengers. And when people no longer believe in a brand, they don't need warnings or proof. They walk away, coldly and definitively. China moves silently, and the domino effect begins to spread worldwide. Right after the Air India 171 crash, while Boeing had yet to release any official statement on the cause, China suddenly sent a confidential notice to its Civil Aviation Authority temporarily suspend the acceptance of all new Boeing aircraft until an independent technical safety review is completed. This move did not appear in the media, but Chinese airlines immediately froze all 131 valid orders, including both the Boeing 737 MAX and the 787 Dreamliner. Strangely, just a few days later, Chinese aircraft manufacturer Comac announced an increase in production of the C919, the aircraft considered Boeing and Airbus's local rival. Observers suspect that Beijing sees the Air India 171 incident as a golden opportunity to push Boeing out of the Asian market. It wasn't just China. Several countries in Africa and the Middle East also began to act quietly. Egypt and Nigeria announced a temporary halt in receiving the Boeing 737 MAX due to concerns from internal public opinion. Saudi Arabia Airlines was reportedly requested to suspend Phase 3 payments for a contract of 34 aircraft and quietly sent representatives to renegotiate with Airbus. Qatar Airways, one of Boeing's most loyal clients, suddenly declared it would reassess its fleet strategy during a closed-door meeting without media presence. At the same time, leaked documents from French investors showed that Airbus had secretly offered up to a 30% discount to airlines that previously bought Boeing planes, along with a commitment to guarantee on-time delivery. A source close to the U.S. Department of Commerce said they don't have to declare war. They just need to let Boeing die slowly, one contract at a time. From being the global market leader, Boeing is now gradually being pushed to the margins. But what's more chilling is that even America's closest allies are now sitting down with Airbus. In an emergency internal meeting, Boeing's chief financial officer was said to have called it a global strategic retreat. Written by someone else. No one is buying. The assembly lines are forced to halt. From April to June 2025, the number of new orders Boeing received was only 1/4 compared to the same period last year. On average, they received fewer than 3 orders per week. There were weeks with 0 orders. The first time this has happened since the COVID-19 crisis. In a leaked internal meeting, a regional director spoke bluntly. "We don't need more storage. What we need are parking lots to hold the planes no one is coming to claim." At the Everett plant, one of Boeing's largest manufacturing hubs, over 40 aircraft have been fully assembled but have no scheduled delivery. Internally, employees refer to that area as a temporary graveyard. A leaked technical memo stated clearly, if no new orders come in next quarter, 40% of the assembly lines will have to shut down. Not due to lack of manpower, but because there is simply nothing left to do. Worse, according to an analysis by independent consulting group StratAero, the number of canceled orders in the first half of 2025 has surpassed even the peak of 2020, when the global aviation industry froze due to the pandemic. To investors, Boeing's order backlog, once a symbol of pride, has turned into a countdown clock. A New York fund manager said bluntly on record, "We once viewed Boeing's backlog as a promise. Now it feels like an illusion." And inside the factories, the atmosphere continues to dim. Technical meetings see fewer and fewer participants. Workers sit waiting for their shifts, but no schedules come. Many describe the scene with just 2 words, waiting to die. The factory was abandoned, and the workers were outraged. On June 3rd, the Boeing plant in North Charleston, once producing hundreds of 787 Dreamliners each year, was abruptly shut down just 3 days after an internal notice. More than 800 workers were laid off without receiving their final paycheck. Some only realized they had lost their jobs when their keycards no longer opened the factory gate. Across social media, hundreds of angry posts from employees spread rapidly with emotional captions, such as "We are not statistics," "A lifetime dedicated to Boeing," and "I was fired by email." A shocking TikTok video captured the moment workers removed each letter from the Boeing sign at the factory's front gate. In the background were chants, "They abandoned us." The video quickly surpassed 2 million views in just 24 hours, and several local newspapers described it as the funeral of an industrial empire. According to internal sources, over 6,000 employees had been laid off across the Boeing system in just the first 2 quarters of 2025. But the more alarming trend is the psychological aftermath. Veteran engineers began applying for early retirement. Younger candidates withdrew their applications. As they put it, no one wants to stay on a sinking ship. In Washington state, home to Boeing's headquarters, a group of former workers officially filed a federal lawsuit accusing the company of violating the WARN Act by failing to give 60 days notice before mass layoffs. Inside the company, rumors spread that several senior supervisors had filed complaints with the Department of Labor, alleging that workers were forced into unpaid leave, while Boeing continued receiving public support funds. Once an icon of American industry, the once bustling factories are now just cold blocks of concrete. And in the eyes of those left behind at those locked gates, one unanswered question remains: did Boeing truly change? Or did they simply no longer need us? The inside is starting to rot. Employees rebel, shareholders turn. There's one truth Boeing has never dared to admit. Its greatest fear isn't the media nor the customers, but what's festering within its own walls. On March 9th, 2024, John Barnett, a veteran engineer who had exposed Boeing, died under suspicious circumstances while suing the company in court. He once warned, "We're no longer building airplanes. We're building flying coffins." After his death, a wave of whistleblowing erupted like wildfire, spreading from one facility to another. Anonymous reports flooded in, exposing everything from falsified inspection records, skipped safety checks, to affixing certified labels on defective parts just to meet delivery deadlines. An engineer at the Renton factory admitted in a leaked internal recording, "We knew it wasn't right. But leadership wanted it faster, cheaper, and prettier on paper." The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration (FAA) had to launch an emergency investigation after receiving reports that Boeing skipped pressure tests on life-saving components. One insider stated bluntly, "No inspections at all. They just wanted the shipment out. Whether passengers survive or not, that's not their concern." As engineers walked away, shareholders revolted. A group of investors representing over $1 billion in equity filed a lawsuit against the executive board, accusing them of concealing the true backlog and staging artificial revenues. They called the new CEO a puppet installed to keep the stock price up until the company is offloaded. A major shareholder wrote in an internal email, "If this is how Boeing survives, I'd rather lose my money than keep my shares." Within Boeing's internal network, information leaks were described as a contagious disease. After every meeting, snapshots of notes, quoted remarks, or audio files would appear on Reddit and Twitter. And the worst part, no one wants to stay silent anymore. From engineers to supervisors, from technicians to security guards, anyone could be the next to ignite an internal explosion. No one can save them anymore. 3 scenarios if Boeing hits rock bottom. Engineers have left production lines or shut down. Customers have turned away. Boeing hasn't declared bankruptcy, but it's clear to everyone they're in free fall. And now the biggest question is no longer what happened, but rather what happens next. Scenario 1. Break up the company. Keep defense, abandon commercial aviation. Experts call this the amputation to survive option, dismantling Boeing to preserve what still generates profit. Specifically, the company could split in two. One side is defense and military aviation, still profitable, still backed by the U.S. government. The other is the commercial airplane division, bleeding losses, losing clients, and possibly sold off. Internal sources say Mitsubishi Japan and Qatar Airways have held quiet talks with several U.S. investment funds. Their goal: to acquire Boeing's assembly line's engineering staff and commercial aircraft technology. If this becomes reality, future Boeing planes will no longer bear the American flag. They will be the product of Japan Qatar, or a new entity, no longer tied to America's pride. Scenario 2. Temporary nationalization. When the White House is forced to act, when a corporation poses a threat to national security, Washington cannot stay silent. Boeing is more than just an aircraft manufacturer. It supplies planes to the U.S. Air Force, missiles to the Department of Defense, and critical radar systems for NASA. If Boeing collapses, the entire defense supply chain could be thrown into disarray. That's why many experts believe the U.S. government may be forced to temporarily nationalize Boeing, just as it did with General Motors in 2008. A leaked report from the Department of Transportation states, the government is internally discussing intervention strategies if Boeing's situation does not improve by the end of Q3. But if nationalization becomes reality, Boeing will no longer be a self-governing corporation. It will become a federal manufacturing unit, surviving on government funding, no longer in control of its own destiny. Scenario 3. The quiet death. No bankruptcy, but nothing left. No press release. No shareholder meeting. No tears shed on television. Just an ordinary day. A young engineer walks into the assembly area and finds it empty. A factory gate locked without a single notice. An email sent out in silence with no reply. No one talks about Boeing anymore. No more orders pouring in. No more lines of people at aircraft handover ceremonies. And the emergency meetings with the FAA have disappeared from aviation officials' calendars. The factories that once lit up all night have now become vacant lots overgrown with weeds. The blue logo, once a symbol of prestige and technology, now fades on cracked brick walls with flakes of paint blown away by the wind. The technical documents that were once national assets are now sold off in lots on bankruptcy liquidation platforms. At some point, you realize it's been a long time since you last flew on a Boeing. No one closes the coffin, because the body has not been found. No funeral, because no one believes that Giant truly died. Only a thin trail of smoke fading into the sky, where an empire once soared. This is not a shocking collapse. It is a disappearance, prolonged cold and unnoticed. And sometimes that is the scariest way for a legend to end. A costly lesson is anything truly too big to fall. Boeing was once the pride of America, a name synonymous with breakthrough technology, absolute reliability, and global dominance. But what is happening now reminds many of collapses once thought impossible. Nokia, Kodak, Lehman Brothers, they were once giants. Now they are just case studies. The question is, we, the people who invest, fly, and trust in major corporations, what will we learn? That profit should never outweigh safety. That every plane crash is not just an accident, but a collapse of ethics oversight and moral responsibility. That agencies like the FAA or NTSB only serve the public when they are truly independent, not when they sit at the same table as those they're meant to regulate. And that every promise, every polished report, becomes meaningless if written at the cost of human life. We've grown used to trusting logos, tailored suits, and long speeches on television. But if we no longer question what's behind them, are we not boarding flights without knowing who checked the engine? Maybe Boeing won't fall today. But if all that's left is blind faith, vague promises, and political shielding, who can say another tragedy won't return? And deeper still, if even Boeing loses our trust, who can we rely on every time we step into the sky Boeing is spiraling into uncharted territory? But what do you think? Has the worst already come? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next truth.